Yeah.
Wrecks that are in the waters around the Florida Keys. This tan building to my left over here is called Building 1. It was the first masonry building in Key West. It was built by the Navy. The first floor was a coal depository, the second floor was a sailmaker's loft. That's where the USS Maine took on coal before its ill-fated journey to Havana in 1898. If any of you are going to continue on, once we get unloaded, you're going to transfer to this train right here with my buddy Dougie.
Ouais, Rado, ouais, non.
Straight ahead is Mallory Square. That's where we do the sunset celebration every night. People that we talked about on the tour are in that sponge garden, or sculpture garden, And I want to thank you very much for choosing the world famous Tom Tour train. We're owned and operated by Historic Tours of America, the nation's storyteller. Okay, it is safe for you to get off. If anybody has any questions, let me ask you.
Picture of it.
I love these tourists. You know why I love the tourists? They always get to the point. Oh, maybe you're hoping and praying I'll get to the point. That's what I'll do. So take a good look at the right corner. Here is the southernmost house. Built on this right corner in 1896. Cost above it then, $250,000. House is worth well over $6 million today. It is a Queen Anne style architectural home. Then on the left corner, a home originally lived in by Eduardo Gonzo, the prosperous scar maker who lived here during the 1800s. Here I'll make a left turn on to Duval Street. Duval Street is the main street of Key West. If you walk the entire length of Duval Street, congratulations. You've done what the locals call the Duval Crawl. It'll take you about 30 minutes. The flow of water. So much so that by the time the waves reach here, the rainy beach in the Florida Keys, you would notice the waves are small. The beach to my right is a popular one, Higgs Memorial Beach, sandy area. Sandy area, a very good place to go swimming as well. Now years ago, along the barrier reef, there were no lighthouses. Because of this problem, ships would often crash onto the barrier reef. When they did so, you would hear the cry in town, "Wreck ashore!" There we able-bodied man, and he would get in his boat head to the reef. Priority number one, rescue the passengers and crew. Once they were safely ashore, the next focus, get right back to the reef. And the first person back to the reef, he was called the wreck captain. He would get 25% of all the goods salvaged in the wreck. And because of shipwrecking by 1850, Key West became a wealthy city. On my right, one of our forts. This one is West Martello Fort. East Martello Fort is several miles in front of us by the airport. But the fort to our right, it was never finished. Most of the bricks for this fort, they were sent to the other side of the island to complete our largest fort, Fort Zachary Taylor. And on my right, the White Street Fishing Pier. Great place for fishing, great place to see a sunrise or a sunset, and many people call it the unfinished road to Cuba. Spanish explorers
At one time, Grand Turk produced salt. These salt ponds where they allow seawater in and evaporate. The production of salt ended around 1964. If you look in the distance, you can see the deep blue water. This is known as the Great Turk Wall. The ocean drops down several miles, just a few thousand feet off the island itself. In 1962, Grand Turk Island was used as a base of operation by NASA to track and recover the first space capsules. port side of the ship, you can see the harbor, Charlotte of Mali. Takes you to the top where there's a fine restaurant and excellent views of the island. Taking the sky ride is one of the top things you can do in the island. It's only around $25 a piece. It's well worth it. The restaurant at the top of the hill is an excellent place to view the island. There are some shops if you want to buy some souvenirs, and the prices were very reasonable. We took a tour of the island. It was only around $35 a piece. They took us to the mountaintop where you could see Magens Bay. The view is also spectacular. It's well worth it. The red building on the right used to be the prison. Then it was a jail. At the current time, it's a museum. We're now approaching a scenic view of the island, looking down to see the harbor. Now approaching the top of the island, called Mountaintop, because we're on top of the mountain. You can look down and see Magens Bay. The bay is about a mile in length. The island was one. You could look out the restaurant, which was open air, and see the bay. We also saw our ship across the bay. We crossed over to the wharf and walked up and down before catching a bus ride back to the cruise port. It's a fun thing to do. I once took a seaplane from this very harbor and flew to the island of St. John, one of the neighboring islands. It was a lot of fun, very enjoyable. If you get a chance, I would recommend it. The sun can be very bright, so don't forget your sunglasses, don't forget your hat, and don't forget a bottle of water to drink. It can be quite tiring if you walk a mile or so. This was not our first trip to St. Thomas, and hopefully it won't be our last. It is a fun place to go. There you go. From Motion on your shoulder. I take a picture with it.
We're taking a tour of Sunday a little bit.
Local businessmen. You know, every time I pass and I look at that house, I am wondering if he has a brother. You know, I can get it for myself, can build me a home like this. This is our bedroom. there, and the washroom is also there for those of you who would like to use the washroom.
On the Dutch side is the Great Bay. It's usually where most cruise ships come to the cruise port. On the northern side of the island, the French side, is where you have the airport. To get to Sentry Hill, you get to take a sky ride. The sky ride is in two parts. The first section, which is around 25 minutes, then you transfer to the second smaller section, which is around 5 minutes. The views are wonderful. It actually cools off somewhat because of the breeze. Once you reach the top, after the second lift, you can see the spectacular views of the French side. You can see Maho Beach, where the airliners fly right over, and people stand there to be photographed. You'll see these pictures a little bit later. In the background, you can actually see the French side. 400 years, salt was the main source of income for St. Maarten. The natural salt ponds, like those in Phillipsburg and Grand Chase, provided the salt needed to keep foods and goods fresh on transatlantic journeys, and was an international export product. Here you have some very clear images of the French side, the airport, and the city below. After having a great and fantastic time, it was time to return back to our ship. It is worth coming back. Walking the back walk to the second lift, you can easily see the French side and Maho Beach very clearly. As you return back to the beginning of the ride, if you turn, you can look up and see Sentry Point. You can see the aerial platform to look around, and to the left of it, you can see the zip lines that it's famous for. Banyan trees are unique It has several features that are different than other trees. It's very common for the trees to overtake and strangle the tree it surrounds. The hanging roots, when making contact with the ground, have the unique ability to spread an ever-widening circle with the help of its aerial roots. It's very common to have bare ground under the trees. The tree also has a unique relationship with wasps. They are the only insect that can pollinate it. Sleeping under the tree is not advisable at night since photosynthesis does not occur. Oxygen is not being produced by the trees. More carbon dioxide compared to other average trees, which could potentially pose health risks to one sleeping underneath it. It is pretty here.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
This is the rainy season.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the fish down there.
Oh yeah,
You see it?
I see it.
There's a fall.
Down there waiting for a bus, I guess. Going to 12, we're doing good.
All the water that's flooded down there.
We've already been rained on. This is our second time around.
Oh, okay.
Look at all those vultures up there.
Wow. You can see up there now.
Where the rocks are at. That's where the waves break.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Get
jig brake.
people off and on, huh?
Yeah.
Every time it's in, it's gonna...
That's about the poorest port I've ever seen. Jamaica. We've been to Jamaica, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to St. Martin. I'd consider trying to get a flight right to St. Martin
Mm-hmm.
and see what it costs to stay there. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the branches of the tree swaying.
Mm-hmm.
There's a catch right there.
Oh, you gotta stand up. That didn't do. Oh. What happened? You gotta use the feet. You gotta use the feet. All right, ready now. Oh my God. All right, let's see next week. All right.